My name is Sergio Ferreira. If someone is wondering why someone like me is representing a Norwegian organization, I just say that is exactly the challenge of the industry. I used to be blue eyes and blonde before I joined the industry, but that's the result. I'm still debating is climate change or the challenge of the industry, but still, here we are. But let me see, my presentation is there. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Sergio Ferreira. I was born in Angola, but then I left, traveled the world, and then I was invited back to Angola for one of the largest operators in Angola. I worked in Angola. Most of the people sitting here, they know the work I've done in Angola. I was the director of local content for Angola for that organization. I don't want to promote anybody here. I feel that successfully I did a quite good job. I managed to move over $3 billion over the time to local companies. So I know the challenges, I know how the job is done and how it can be done, the impact of the work we do. Sometimes when I go to restaurants, I don't pay lunch because of the work I did. Is that what we call industry after the fact? It's not corruption, right? You're not long in the position, it's after the fact, so it's okay. So if someone has some money to send my way, I'll share my bank account. So definitely, but Norwegian Energy Partners Association of over 300 companies within the scope of oil and gas industry. It goes from oil and gas, renewable, solar energy. It's 60% subsidized by the Norwegian government, and the remaining 40% is by over 300 partners. And it's such because the European law doesn't allow the countries to subsidize 100% the industry. So I was invited, this is not my full-time job, so just put it in a context. I was invited by the previous Norwegian ambassador to Angola to support the push for Norwegian entities to come to Africa. And I'm proud to say that I convinced, for those who are here and know the work we have been doing, for the second time we have a Norwegian delegation to Namibia. And I was the one who actually convinced them to come to Namibia because they didn't know what was happening in Namibia. We had an extensive conversation about the potential of Namibia, and I must say that today there's a huge interest in Norway for Namibia. We had the Minister of Energy, Maggie, also was in Norway for three or four good days where we discussed opportunities. I can assure that going forward, there's a probability of Norwegian companies coming to Namibia. And then the topic for my presentation, I have good 15 minutes, is best practice. But there's a twist to it, right? Because my experience as African, of course, and then someone who knows the industry in and out, and when people talk about best practice, there's always a sort of ambiguity, right? Because it depends on which side of angle you're looking at. International companies obviously will come and try to push and use those terms that most of the time make it difficult for us to kind of go for. I mean, everybody's been talking about corruption, and I feel a bit sad when people have that perception that we Angolans are all corrupt. And exactly because I'm Angolan, I'm working for a Norwegian entity that's, for those who know the high standards of Norwegian entity, and those 5 or 6 or 8 years I worked for that oil and gas company in Angola, I was never accused of corruption. It's not because I'm smart, right? Because I know to read the game. It's because we are all humans, right? And I'm not more or less corrupted than anybody in this room. But so sometimes when we discuss business, I will challenge people, especially, not to label, because it makes it more difficult for people to work. Especially that label that goes to most African countries, make it difficult for people to operate. Because my experience is we have different standards. We are Africans, we live here, we have family and relatives. That perception of corruption that's applicable in Europe, most of the time is not applicable here in African continent, right? So, yes, we all work in the industry. Most of the people sitting here, they know how the dynamics are. There's a lot of professionals here that used to work with me. Mr. Probably Brito knows, the rest of the dozen other people. So that's some of the introduction I would like to do. Norwegian Energy Partners, in terms of just to put into the context of what we discussed here, my interest and the thing I've been pushing for is partnership with local entities. My experience is, for the years I've been working in the industry, the local entity is always on the losing end, right? We sign MOUs, we sign partnerships, but the control of the entities of those entities are most of the time tend to favor international entities, and because the local partners are the weak end. So what I like about it, what I'm pushing with Norwegian Energy Partners is like bringing companies, promoting companies actually interested in doing true partnership with the local entities, where the local partners actually an equity in the business, understand how the business is run, one, which is important. It's not just a matter of giving away the authority, say, I'm the local partner. Once at the end of the year, we look at the numbers and then things, and then you get something. It's like participation, having locals actually to understand the dynamics of the business. What I usually say, I represent what local content is, because when I was hired by this company, I didn't have a clue about oil and gas business. I was invited, I was promoted, I was given the authority to make decisions, and that to me counts, because today the understanding I have of the industry helps to push locals in getting to the business, owning companies, providing services, and that is actually the true impact you have in the community, because the locals will let the money stay in country, they'll hire, they'll create jobs, they'll train people, and that's to me is what counts. I'm perfect example. I have one company providing services in Angola, I have 250 people working for me, 100% locals, and it works. It's no worse, no better than any other international company, because we must comply with the procedures of the industry. So it's possible, it can be done by us, but in collaboration, of course, because of the high standards of the industry with international partners. And that's to me, it's what Norwegian Energy Partners bring to this business. It's promoting partnerships, companies actually interested in collaborating, teaching, because it takes time to get the locals at the international standard. That is what that is impossible, it takes time, it's a matter of strategies. If we initiate the conversation now, if we initiate the dialogue now and explain to people how the industry works, my experience is it is possible, it can be done. It takes time, yes, it's a bit more expensive because people need to come up to speed and understand, and most of the people have been working in the industry 30, 40 years. Norway has discovered the oil in the 60s, and today I would rather say 100% of the value chain in the oil and gas industry is Norwegian owned, but was a push by the government. Policies, collaboration. Yes, operators will always scream, or operators will tend to look at it from a disadvantaged starting point. So that collaboration between the government, the business community, and of course the operators, long-term will benefit the community, and that's what Norwegian Energy Partners is about. Is promoting partnership, collaboration, knowledge. Transfer of knowledge is crucial in this industry, right? And there's also the financial component that I want to promote here, but there's also the fact that for local companies actually talking about best practice, for local companies to kind of get a foothold in the industry, because it's quite capital intensive industry, it costs a lot of the money to operate, and of course most of us don't have that capital that requires to get into the business. So how do we answer that question? How do we engage with local companies and with operators and create that framework that enables the locals to actually have an opportunity to kind of at lower level position themselves within the industry? So that's some of the things we propose here. And of course, there's no one solution fits all, and that's why when people start talking about examples from different geographies, it makes it difficult for me to understand, because my experiences of travel across the continent have been to Tanzania, Uganda, and of course Angola. Now I'm coming to Namibia, being to Mozambique. Each country has their own specificities, and that's one of the things when people talk about best practice. It is important to find that common ground. Of course, following laws and regulations, which are pretty much the same. And my experience is most countries want to follow those laws and regulations, but there's some specific twists that need to fit that local geography, and that's my experience, and that's some of the things that I promote whenever I'm discussing and bringing international partners to partner with local companies here in the continent, is to finding that local specificity that makes that joint venture successful and a long-term partnership. Because that to me is that the license to operate. We have some Norwegian companies operating in Angola, not to mention that there are some operating in Angola that make partnership with also local companies here. Some of the people sitting in the room who know the work we've been doing. So that's what we're trying to bring to Namibia. And of course, you're always open, I'm always open to change ideas, to discuss how we can jointly bring Namibians, of course, in partnership with international entities and bring this industry to the next level. So that's all. Thank you.